Okay, so welcome to video 11, which is going to focus on quoting, on quotations. This is part 1. There'll be a part 2. Part 1 involves 5 types of quotations, okay? 5 types of quotations. I want to begin with a definition. Quoting is taking exact words or sentences from a book or an article and inserting it in your paper. Okay? You take the words from an article and you put them in your paper exactly as they are written. You cannot change a sentence from an article that you're going to put in quotation marks. You cannot change it. If you do want to change it, there's a way to do it. But you have to do it in that way, and I'm going to show you that in the 4th type of quotation. I'm going to show you that. But when you take in your paper, when you have quotation marks, you better have the exact words as they were in the article or the book. Okay? That's what quoting is. Okay? Now, we quote for 2 reasons. Okay? We quote because there's a section in the article that's really impressive. The wording on it is really nice, and you want to include it in your paper. Okay? That's the first reason why we quote. The second reason is because some sections of an article, if they're too technical or too intricate, too difficult to summarize, then you can quote them. Okay? So these are the 2 reasons why we quote. Because the sentence or sentences are very well written and you want to put them in your paper. And the second reason is because you find a section that, oh, this is going to be very difficult for me to summarize, so I'm going to quote it. And that's okay. It's okay. However, here's the thing. There is a 20% limitation on quoting. A 20% limitation on quoting. Let me explain it to you. Okay? Let's say you have a paper that is 1 page long. 1 page long. And your paper has 20 lines. 20 lines. And you have included some quotations. And you have 20 lines. This means the 20% limit is that your quotations in 20 lines cannot be more than 4 lines. 4 is 20% of 20. Is that correct? Let's say you have a paper that's 5 pages long. 5 pages long. Okay? In a paper that's 5 pages long, all the quotes that you use cannot be more than 1 page long. 20%. If your paper is half quotations, forget it. 0. No credit. You have gone over the 20% limit. So that means that 80% of your paper must be in your words. And you remember we summarized. When we practice summarizing, it's not just changing 1 or 2 words from a sentence in the article. Your sentences have to be different in structure. We practice that. Now we're in the second half of the semester. If I see a sentence that comes from the article and you have it like no quotation marks, you have it in your paper, I'm going to take 10 points off. 10 points off. Because that's plagiarism. In English 1A, if you have those sentences, you'll get an F. That's plagiarism. And if you do it a second time, you can be kicked out of the class. How are you going to learn that? I have to penalize you each time you do it. And if you have too many of those, you'll get a low grade. Your grade goes down. Okay? So you have to learn this. So, because of this 20% limit, you must select your quotations very carefully. Very carefully. This summary you're going to write outside of class. So remember, if you have 5 pages in your summary, all your quotations cannot be longer than 1 page. I will count the lines. And I will make, if you go over the 20%, I will make a note and I will lower your score. Select your quotations very carefully. Do not go over the 20% limit. Very good. All right, so the next important point, equal in importance to 20%, is that every quotation has to have an introduction. That means that you have to say something before you put the quotation. You cannot just put, if you have a period and then you put a quotation and then another sentence, you cannot do that. You have to introduce your quotes. Okay? So every quotation you insert into your paper must be introduced with the use of an attributed word. What's an attributed word? Like says, the author says, the author explains, the author writes. According to the author, according to the article, the author asserts, the author points out, Harkington thinks, or Harkington suggests, Harkington shows. These are attributed verbs. And you notice, they're in the S form. S form. Usually, there's only one author. Sometimes there are 2 authors. Okay, when there are 2 authors, we say, the authors say. The authors explain. The authors write. According to the authors, okay, when it's 2 or more. But the article that we are dealing with is written by Harkington. What is his first name? Josh. Josh Harkington. Okay? So we use these, the attributive words. Okay? Alright, so every quotation must be introduced. Okay, so I'm going to show you 5 types of quotations. The first one is the most common. This is a quotation where you have a single complete sentence from capital to period. From capital to period, okay? So I'm going to show you 2 examples. Now, I put my introductions in bold. Not the quotation, but the introduction. Because you may not believe this, but writing good quote introductions is an art. It takes a lot of skill. You get better with practice. But the simplest introduction can be, the author says, comma, boom, quotation. Alright, so here's my introduction. In the article, meet the California couple who uses more water, and of course the ellipsis means that the title is longer. But I don't want to put a title, it's almost 2 lines. Okay? In the article, so this is a prepositional phrase, huh? Because of the ellipsis, I didn't put a comma. I didn't put a comma because it would look awkward. Okay? So, in the article, this article, Josh Harkington reports. This is my introduction. I should have put this in bold too. And this is the quote. Over the last decade, California's almond acreage has increased by 47% and its pistachio acres has doubled, fueled in the latter case by the Resnick's advertising genius. This word doesn't mean latter. It means the second. The second. Here we're talking about almonds, and here the pistachios. So if this is the latter case, in the case of pistachios. Okay? That's what that means. Alright. Now, you see this number right here? This number refers to the page of the article. Do you see the letter P for page? Do you see a letter P? No. So are you going to put a letter P in your these are called parenthetical citations. Parenthetical citations. Okay? And you notice where the period is? Can you see it? So here's the quotation. Begins with the quotation mark and it ends here. And then the number 10 in parentheses and then the period. That's how I want you to do it. Okay? So we're beginning the use of parenthetical citations. Parenthetical citations. Angel.
Does the parenthetical citation is the last name of the author?
Good question. Good question. Sometimes it does. I'm going to show you an example. I have three versions of this quote. 3 versions, okay? Notice the difference, okay? See if you can tell the difference between this one and this one. What's the difference? What's the difference between this one and this one? What's the difference?
The introduction?
That. The word that. If I use the word that, I don't have to have a comma. But if I don't use the word that, then I use a comma. You see that? Okay. Now, the third version is this. Here, in my introduction, I don't mention the author. I don't mention the article. Okay? It is no secret that over the last decade, so because I didn't mention the author and I didn't mention the article, in the parenthetical, I mentioned the author. So, if you mention the author in the introduction, then all you need is the number. Don't put P for page, don't write page, nothing like that. Parentheses, number. That's all. Okay? Alright, so this is a complete sentence quotation. Now, the second type is where you only have part of a sentence. Partial sentence quote. Okay? Here's the first example. California is fortunate to have a, quote, vast network of dams, reservoirs, and canals that transport water from the northern part to the southern part of the state. Okay? So I have this as part of the sentence. No capital. I didn't start at the beginning, so there's no capital and no comma. No comma. Okay? So that's my first example. It comes from page 8. The period goes after. Very good. Second example. Okay, but I have 2 partial sentence quotes. Farmers, rainwater only provides farmers 5 to 16 inches of water each year, which is about 20% of what's required for a productive almond or pistachio harvest. On page 9, you can find this. You can find this. Okay? So it's part of a sentence, not a complete sentence. Okay? Question?
So does that mean that when we have a partial quotation, we don't need a comma before the partial quotation?
No, usually you don't. And I have a note to that effect. A partial sentence quote usually does not require a comma before the quote. Usually. Sometimes it might, but usually no. And the first word of the quote is not capitalized. It's not capitalized unless it is a capitalized noun such as Porterville College. Okay? So usually, the first word not capitalized, usually no comma. Okay?
The introduction it's a little bit different than the one that is the...
Yes. If I put according to Harkins, would that be enough? According to Harkins, 5 to 16 inches of water each year. I had to put in some words to make it fit. You see, that's why introducing a quote takes some thinking, some practice.
And we don't have to use attributive words in that case?
Well, yeah, here's my attributive word, according to. But here, no, not really.
But usually when you have the entire quote, you have the attributive word just before the.
Yes, very true. Very true. When you have a complete sentence quotation, you're going to have the attributed word, a comma, and then the quote. But on a partial sentence quote, no.
It's not necessary to.
No.
Okay.
No. And look at the introduction for the second part, which is about 20% of what's required for a productive almond or pistachio harvest. This introduces the second part. So, using partial quotes, you take the most important part of the sentence and you put that in there. And that way, you don't have such a longer quote. So it'll help you not to go beyond the 20% limit. So partial sentence quotes are good to use. Okay? All right, very good. So I showed you that. No commas, no capital letters, usually. The third type of quote is a quote where you have a complete sentence, but you split it. You split it. You present part of the sentence, and then the introduction, and then the other part of the quote, like this. Over, quotation mark, over the last decade, comma, Harkinson explains, comma, California's almond acreage has increased by 47% and its pistachio acres has doubled. Page 10. Okay? So I could have put Harkinson explains that, and then over the last decade, California's almond. So this is just a variation, an interrupted quote. The quote is interrupted, the introduction is in the middle, and then the second part. Commas on both sides. Angel.
I mean, if the comma have to be between the quotation marks, inside the quotation marks.
Yes, here yes. Here yes. And usually, if I didn't have a parenthetical, the period would go inside. But because we're going to use parentheticals, the period is going to go on the outside. But in the interrupted, the comma does go inside. The comma does go inside. Okay? And then it goes right after the attributed word, and then the second part. Okay? I have a second example. Though California passed its first ever groundwater regulations in 2014, writes Harkinson, comma inside, comma here, water district won't be required to limit pumping for at least another 4 years. Page 10. Okay? Two examples of interrupted quotes. Okay? Questions? All right, so we go to the fourth type of quote. The fourth type of quote is one in which we use brackets in order to change one or more words of the original quotation. And I'll give you examples of those. Why would you want to change a word? Why would you want to change a word? Mainly to fit the introduction. If the word in the quotation doesn't fit the introduction, you have to change it. Or sometimes you want to add something. And so if you want to add something, even if it's a punctuation mark, you put it in brackets. Brackets. Okay? Here is my first example. I would like you to go on page 8. Page 8. Can you find this quote on page 8? Can you find it? I'm using the same verb, but the one in the quotation is different, no? What's the one in the quotation? Getting? It's the gerund, huh? It has a gerund.
Will get.
Will
Will get.
Will get. It's future, sorry. It's future. So, let me read it. Let me read my introduction and then the quote with will get. Will get. Harkinson explains that of the 8.7 trillion, and I should have put gallons of water, of the 8.7 trillion gallons of water that flows down from Northern California, It's a partial sentence quote, huh? Partial sentence quote. 20% of it will get sucked. I could have put will get sucked. It seems to work, huh? But I put gets. Active, present tense. 20% gets sucked by huge pumps into two giant concrete line canal systems and sent hundreds of miles to Southern California cities and farms. Okay? So I decided to change will get to gets. And so I did it with brackets. Okay? If you change anything, you must use brackets. Here's a second example. On page 8 also. I want you to find this quote. And by the way, let me come back to this quote. You see these words that are underlined in blue? That's the way they are in the article. That's the way they are in the article. These words are linked. They're linked. If you click on these words, it'll take you to an article. Yeah. So, don't change it. Don't change it. Leave it the way it's in the original. Okay?
So that what you're saying is that all the words that link it to something else, we don't have to change. Is that what?
Right. If you quote that sentence, quote it the way it's in the original. In the original, these two words are underlined. You can see it on page 8. So leave it like that.
So like in any article, if it's something like underlined, we don't have to change it.
We don't change it. No. No. Okay. Now, if you decide that some part of the quote is really important and you want to underline it, maybe you want to put it in bold, that part of the quote, then at the end of the quote, you have to write this. You have to write my emphasis. My emphasis. My emphasis. So you have a quote, you have an introduction, according to Douglas, if you can point it to here, according to, and you mention whoever it is, according to, and then you have a quotation, and here's your quotation, and your quotation finishes here, and you want to put underline. You want to underline this. You want to put it in bold letters. Okay, so you put here, you put my emphasis. Emphasis. Okay?
And then you have to put that parenthetical.
That's right. Then you put the parenthetical. Okay? Period. But here, I did not underline that. That's in the original. Okay? So I just leave it like that. Okay? But if you want to underline something that's not underlined, in order to have the reader pay attention to it, you do it that way. You put my emphasis.
But we don't have to use bracket or parentheses with the word.
No. You just underline it, and at the end, this tells the reader that it was not underlined in the original. You included that underlining. Okay? All right, very good. Okay, do I have, is this my second example? I think it is. This is my second example of when you change something inside the quotation.
No, this is the first one.
This is the first one?
Yeah.
No, I had one with the get.
That's push.
This was my first example, and now this is my second.
Push.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry. Thank you. Luis. So, can you find this quote? Can you find this quote?
It's the same one.
It's the same one?
Yeah,
Same place? But it doesn't say push, Tom.
Oh, yeah.
Pushing? It says pushing? Jaron? Correct?
Is that number 9?
Yeah, page 8. Page 8.
Is it pushing? Oh.
Yeah,
Oh, push.
it says pushing. Okay? So I changed pushing to pushed. Pushed. So I put it in brackets. Do you see that? Okay? All right, very good. So this is my second example. This is my introduction. you see how pushing would not work? It has pushing, no, it wouldn't work. So push goes with my introduction, and that's why I changed it, okay? All right, so now the last type of quotation. This one is a little, maybe confusing, I'm not sure, okay? But we usually call it a quote within a quote, okay? And in these quotations, you are quoting a sentence from the article that has words that have quotation marks. The sentence itself, okay? In this case, the sentence quoted has within it one or more words that appear within quotation marks, like this. In the original article or book, those originally quoted words receive single quotation marks. Single quotation marks. These. Okay? And I only have one example. Can you find, I think it's, let me show you the quote, page 7. Page 7. Can you find this sentence on page 7? You have to go to the article, huh? I didn't give you page 7. You found it, Kayla? Okay. So these last 3 words have quotation marks, correct? Okay? In the original, this is the sentence, it has quotation marks. Well, what if you want to quote it? What if you want to quote it? How can you put a quotation marks? You're going to put quotation mark here, and then another quotation marks here. It's going to look a little different. So here's how we do it. Resnick has said that Sandel's question changed my life that very day. In his article, however, Judge Harkinson mentions that's my introduction, that by then she had certainly seen the negative stories such as the one in the Los Angeles Times, I leave it just like it's in the article, that describe Lost Hills jarring, single quotation mark, third world conditions. And then I close with single quotation, and then I close the quotation with double. Okay? So because this is quoted in the original, I indicate that with single quotation mark. At the end, I have to close this one with this quotation mark, and then I have to close this, the beginning of the quotation, with double quotation mark. So at the end, you're going to have 3.
But that one ends in day, no? Like the first quotation ends
Yes.
in day. Like,
I didn't write it correctly? It's not like it's in the article?
No, she's saying that the first quotation ends in the very day, by the period in the
Yes.
quotation.
I have 2 quotations in this section. The first one is a partial sentence. Partial sentence. It begins here, no capital, and it ends here. Okay? Then I have another sentence. Okay.
I think I got it.
I am quoting this sentence. What do you mean? Alma?
You're closing the by at the end of the conditions?
Yeah, you see, this is the quotation. Okay? It begins here and it ends here.
Oh.
That's the sentence that's in the article, no? I'm quoting this sentence. It begins here and it ends here. In the article, this has double quotations. You saw it in the article. But when I quoted, I put the quotation mark by the word by. That's the first word in the sentence. By then, she had certainly seen the negative stories, such as the one in the Los Angeles Times, that describe Lost Hills jarring third world conditions. That's a sentence. Now, this single quotation is not a quotation. This is possessive, right? The conditions of Lost Hills. So here, because this is quoted in the original, I put a single quotation mark. And then I close it with that single quotation mark. But then I have to finish the quotation, the double.
What's my conclusion? Because you said before that the last one, two quotations, not with the first one.
I'm sorry. Did I point to this?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry I confused you. I have two quotes. This is one of them. This is the third quote. Yeah, sorry. So this double quotation mark closes this one. Yeah, that would be confusing. Thank you, Alvin. Questions on quotation, the first type of quotation, second, third, fourth, fifth. Do you have any questions?
Like this.
Which one is the sixth?
Pardon me?
Is there any more?
Yeah, there are two more. But that's going to be part two.
Okay.
That's going to be part two. Okay? Any other question? Okay. So I hope, I don't want to require you to use all 5 types of quotations in your summary. But in case you want to quote a sentence that has quotation marks, this is how we do it. In case you want to change words in a quotation, I showed you how we do it. We put brackets. In case you want to put a quotation that has split between 2 parts and you want to put the introduction in the middle, I showed you how to do that. And very common to have a quotation that's only part of the sentence. Very common. And those are good because they shorten the space of quotations, and you can include maybe 1 or 2 quotations more. Okay? And of course, the most common quotation that I showed you is the single sentence quotation. Those are longer, and you have to be careful because if you use 3 or 4 or 5 of them, you might go over your 20% limit. Okay? But you must remember that each quote must have an introduction. Each quote must have an introduction. You must say something before the quotation. If you say the author says, comma. If you say the author says that, no comma. Okay?
Except when you split it. Because when you split
Except when you split it, you are right. When you split it, you do use commas.
Now what I'm saying is that when you split it, the introduction goes like inside.
Yeah.
So it's not for the.
When you split it, you are right. You are right. Here, when you split the quotation, you're going to use 2 commas. One after the first part and after the second part, before the second part. Okay? So you have all the examples, you have all the information in the paper that I gave you. All right, very good. So that's the end. Very good.